Hello and welcome to the BloodStream podcast, a show serving the greater bleeding disorders community, brought to you by Believe Limited and BloodStream Media, and made possible thanks to our presenting sponsor, Takeda. I'm your patient advocate and host, Patrick James Lynch.
And I am your healthcare advocate, nonprofit nerd, and your other host, Amy Board, reminding you to please speak with a healthcare professional before making any treatment decisions.
On today's show, we've got our gene therapy segment once again, this time highlighting the history of gene therapy with a callback to Portraits of Progress, one of Believe Limited's favorite projects to talk about.
Yes.
And we've also got the return of the I'm Fine segment, this one featuring Benjamin Denman, recently honored at the Hope Gala. We have got all of that and more on today's episode. Welcome to BloodStream.
Listeners, as always, thank you for joining us today. And if you like what you hear, even if you don't like what you hear, regardless, please subscribe to the BloodStream podcast, wherever you get those podcasts. You can also watch the podcast on YouTube or Facebook, which is cool. You can see our cute little faces.
You know, I mean, see our outfits, what the hair looks like, all that good stuff.
It's a thing.
I also want to remind you, dear listeners, that the BloodStream podcast is made possible by our presenting sponsor, Takeda. Yes, that's right. Takeda. Takeda's got this website, bleedingdisorders.com, where you can learn all about Takeda's resources for and commitment to the bleeding disorders community. Takeda, Amy, get this, believes in a world free of bleeds.
That's incredible. I do too, really.
I mean, who wouldn't? But they do.
Okay.
And they are dedicated more than ever in their efforts to offer a wide range of programs and support to help patients throughout their treatment journey, wherever on that journey they may be. You can learn more by simply visiting bleedingdisorders.com. One more time, just because, bleedingdisorders.com. And for their founding and ongoing support of the BloodStream podcast, I would just like to say thanks, Takeda.
Thank you, Takeda. Hi, PJL.
Hey, Amy, we've got the return of the I'm Fine segment today. How about that?
I know. I've honestly missed it a little bit. I love it. And you know what's so funny about the I'm Fine segment? Never before has a segment of ours been like the catalyst for so many different conversations. I feel like that I have had many different things. I think that concept of I'm fine, I'm fine with where I'm at. Things are working for me. And like thinking like maybe things could be different, I think it's just fantastic. So yay, it's back.
It's back. So we'll be getting to that. But first, we've got our gene therapy segment. This one on the history of gene therapy, again, highlighting Portraits of Progress. So let's delay no further and let's get into it.
What's up, BloodStream listeners, and welcome back to another episode of Gene Therapy, A Whole New World. It's your girl, Hannah, and today we are traveling through time to explore the history of gene therapy. From the first sparks of discovery to the major milestones that brought us here, FDA-approved gene therapy for hemophilia, and how hemophilia helps prove what was once thought to be impossible. And to help us tell this story, we're leaning on Portraits of Progress, found at www.portraitsofprogress.com. A fun initiative by CSL Behring celebrating the community's amazing journey and progress along the way. It maps it all out, from early plasma treatments in the 1940s to the first gene therapy experiments in the 80s, all the way to the first successful hemophilia trials in the 2000s. Joining me today are voices from every part of that timeline. Dr. Mark Kay from Stanford University, a pioneer whose work helped make those early trials possible. And Ying-Poi Liu, a scientist bridging research and community. Dan and Jerome, community advocates featured on Portraits of Progress, sharing their experience living with hemophilia. And of course, Greg, whose perspective as a patient who's actually received gene therapy brings this story full circle. Though before we jump in, here's a quick word from our sponsor. It's a Whole New World gene therapy segment brought to you by CSL Behring and their Hemophilia B gene therapy treatment. To learn more about gene therapy, hear patient stories, and view additional support resources, visit beyondhemb.com or download B Support wherever you get your apps for more information and to manage your treatment journey. Now, let's head back to the early 1980s when the dream of gene therapy was beginning to take shape.
The cloning of the factor 9 gene and the factor 8 genes in the early 1980s was a major breakthrough in science. This was, of course, essential in order to develop gene therapy, because in gene therapy we use the defective gene in order to deliver that to the patient via vector. And so the patient will eventually, after treatment, produce its own clotting factor, and so no longer need to have infusions anymore.
That discovery, cloning the very genes responsible for hemophilia, well, it gave scientists the map they needed to start dreaming about genetic cures. But back then, this was still brand new territory. No one really knew if it could work. And for many families, the 1980s also carried deep heartbreak.
Unfortunately, in the early 1980s, many people with hemophilia were infected with HIV and HCV viruses due to infusions with infected blood. This tragedy pushed the scientific community even harder to develop new and safer treatment options.
Out of that tragedy came determination. Researchers doubled down, and some of those scientists, like Dr. Mark Kay, would spend decades chasing the dreams of a safer, longer-lasting solution.
I've worked in the gene therapy field since like the early 1990s. I think when I started in the field, the concept of gene therapy was relatively simple, and there were a lot of promises made that weren't fulfilled because it turns out there were a lot of technical barriers, some of which at the time it wasn't clear, obvious how to try to study that to get around some of these barriers. But over time, over the last few decades, a number of achievements have been made. You know, we made contributions, many others, that have really pushed the field forward, where it's become something that has gained a lot of respect.
Dr. Mark Kay would go on to lead some of the earliest gene therapy research in hemophilia. But to understand why hemophilia became such a central test case, you have to start with the people who lived through those early years. So on the Portraits of Progress timeline, this era marks the beginning, the 1950s and 60s, when treatment was limited, risky, and often experimental.
I had a pretty significant history of hemophilia in my family, so they were ready for it. They had in the delivery room to give me a direct transfusion if I needed it. I didn't, fortunately, but they were prepared. So I was diagnosed, as soon after birth as possible, back in 1953. So I was kind of on the leading edge of hemophilia research when I was 5. And I was subject to numerous experiments. As a child, I remember a great deal of going in the hospital, because that's the way it was treated back then. There was no outpatient, there was no home therapy. So every time I had to bleed, I had to go into the hospital. And then it took a week or more in the hospital to resolve the bleed before they would release me. So I was in the hospital about a third of my life by the time I was 12.
Dan's experience wasn't unique. In those early decades, treatment was long, unpredictable, and as we heard from Ying, not always safe.
I was born before there was a diagnosis for factor 9. I had a younger brother who preceded me by a couple of years, who died at the age of 10 months with the disease, undiagnosed. So as a result of that, Dr. Quick from the University of Chicago was involved at my birth, and he did diagnose me within a few days of my birth that I was a factor 9 Christmas disease. He had just weeks before diagnosed Stephen Christmas, and who the disease is named after.
Greg's story shows us just how recent this all is. Within a single lifetime, we've gone from no diagnosis to genetic discovery to curative trials. And back in the lab, researchers like Dr. Mark Kay were figuring out how to turn those genetic discoveries into real treatments, marking one of the biggest turning points you'll see on the Portraits of Progress timeline.
The real technology advancements were in the vectors that are the vehicles we use to transfer genes into tissues to try to treat genetic and now even acquired diseases. So as gene therapists, what we tried to do was to remove the viral genetic information, put in our therapeutic genes of interest, and use the virus shell or the outside of the virus to actually allow that genetic information to be transferred into the tissues that you wanted to target to treat a specific genetic disorder.
Those viral shells became the backbone of modern gene therapy. Scientists tested them in mice, then in dogs, and eventually in the first human trials. And one of those early volunteers was Dan.
I was in a gene therapy trial about 20 years ago. There was a safety trial where the goal was to make sure that they could do this without killing people. And they were successful, but the therapy itself didn't last. It only produced factor for about 6 months. But the thing is that there's a direct line between the trial that I did back then and the trials that are going on now.
A direct line from early experiments like Dan's to the therapies now on the verge of changing hemophilia treatment forever. If you scroll through Portraits of Progress, you can see the evolution mapped out across decades, from those early safety trials in the early 2000s to the first FDA approvals that followed years later.
As a scientist, my hope for the hemophilia community will be that there will be many more different treatment options available for them, such as gene therapy, which can be a potentially curative treatment, so that they can pick and choose what's suited for them. And most importantly, I hope that all patients can have access to these transformative treatments.
That dream, access for all, is what drives so many in this field. And as Dr. Mark Kay explains, the discoveries that began in hemophilia labs are now reaching far beyond.
There are some trials that are going to start that potentially can get around that problem. And that is a way to take the AAV DNA that encodes the factor IX sequence and integrate it into a safe spot in the genome, in the hepatocytes. And there's a trial that I believe is going to start very soon, where the way they're going to do this is they're going to use a gene editing technology in addition to the gene therapy. So I'm sure that many of the listeners have heard of CRISPR or CRISPR engineering, but I think this is a hugely expanding space, and I think something that it's very exciting.
CRISPR and the AAVs, these are the words of modern medicine. But their roots trace back to people like Greg and Dan, to scientists like Dr. Kay and Dr. Liu, and to share hope that one day a bleeding disorder wouldn't define a life.
I think gene therapy will do wonders for the community at large because it depends on the person and it depends on what their severity level is. It also depends on whether if the gene therapy is right for them as well, because most people have joint issues and doing gene therapy will probably help them. It will help them not have that joint issues no more. It'll help them live a better life, and they can still continue to be active in their personal lives and their professional lives.
For Jerome, gene therapy represents hope, a new chapter waiting to be written. For Greg, that chapter is already being lived.
It was the infusion of Hemgenex. It's a treatment that I did not really expect to see become available in my lifetime. It just seemed like something out of a dream. The doctors fully understood what they were doing. I realized what almost a miracle this was, and the fact that it works so well. Just literally something that I never expected in my lifetime to get a chance to enjoy. I was just so fortunate at the age of 72 at the time to get a chance to experience this.
If you're visiting Portraits of Progress, you've seen faces like Dan's and Jerome's, each story showing how far we've come and how every step in research and lived experience builds us towards something bigger. And as we look ahead, the story is not finished. Next time, we'll explore what's still unknown, the future of gene therapy, and the questions researchers and patients are daring to ask next. From the lab bench to lived experience, that's the story of gene therapy, and it's still being written. If you've enjoyed today's episode, share it with someone who loves a little science history and a lot of hope. Thanks for listening to BloodStream and another episode of Gene Therapy, A Whole New World. Until then, it's your girl Hannah, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Hannah, for that fantastic gene therapy segment. I love hearing stuff and seeing stuff from Portraits of Progress, so it's great that we could call that back.
For
Before
sure.
we get into I'm Fine, PJL, you actually have some info about HFA's new initiative.
Yeah, listeners, you heard me talk about this on the last podcast episode, but HFA's got a new initiative called the Voice of the Community, and they describe it this way: your experience today shapes what we build for tomorrow. Let's imagine the next decade together, where every voice is heard. Want to create a better future for bleeding disorders? Do ya? Don't get left behind. Join a listening session today. Seats are limited. Reserve your spot and spread the word. So visit HFA's website under Our Work, click on the Voice of the Community, or follow the link in the program note to sign up for a listening session where they do the listening, you do the talking. Again, link in the program notes or by visiting hemophiliafed.org.
Cool. Cool. It's time.
So it's time. It's time for the return of I'm Fine, featuring none other than recently honored Hope Gala honoree, recipient, something like that, Benjamin Denman. He is back with the latest I'm Fine. If you've heard Benjamin Denman's story before, then you know him as someone who has faced hemophilia and inhibitors head on. Today on I'm Fine, we go a step further, exploring what happens when the struggle eases, freedom arrives, and a new question emerges. That question? Who am I without the struggle?
This is all I've ever known. Is that even
possible for me?
I don't want to miss anything.
I don't need that. I don't want to acknowledge my pain.
I don't want to get poked with needles.
I don't want that.
There's nothing wrong.
I'm fine.
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 Today on I'm Fine, we explore what it's like to rediscover identity, independence, and purpose when treatment changes everything.
I wasn't on really anything because they all had of my factor 8, so it's whatever it was stored was an IV drip, like sit and wait, and then because I had bleeds and I wasn't using factor, it was a lot of arrest, ice and elevation and for days. Even when I went to passing agent, it was still always on demand. Man, that was a lot. That was, a dose of medicine every 2 hours till the bleed. And, sometimes that would be, a couple days.
Getting care wasn't simple. It was a fight.
It was go to the emergency room. And then it was a debate and an argument with the emergency room whether I really needed medicine because the medicine costs so much. How do I know that I have hemophilia, and had I ever been diagnosed? And we're going to give you a half a dose. And I at one time was told that I was addicted to my factor. I can just tell from that statement, you don't know what factor does. I was like, I guess you could say I'm addicted to getting my bleeds treated, but that's the only thing.
That's who Benjamin was then. Benjamin the hemophiliac, as he once described himself. Survival became his story.
So I always describe myself before treatments as Benjamin the hemophiliac. The hemophiliac known as Benjamin, because hemophilia was such a major part of me that it just was the most defining characteristics of me, kind of, because it controlled everything.
Then something shifted. For the first time, treatment didn't just manage symptoms. It gave him freedom. Benjamin and his family could finally start a new chapter writing their own story.
We rewrote our story when we no longer had medical problems by moving to Alaska and starting over. We really got to live our dreams now because we're not struggling with medical issues.
But freedom didn't arrive overnight. Benjamin took steps to explore how he could make his journey better.
I want to say about 8-9 years ago, a sub-Q prophylactic medicine came out, and I started that. And I actually started on trial with that for a little bit. And it was amazing. I dropped from, having 2 and 3 bleeds a year. It was an adjustment for a prophylactic to take something every week now, but being a sub-Q made it worth the effort.
With that freedom came a question he had never asked before. What happens when my reason for holding back is gone?
it was about 5 years, we decided that, well, I've always had a dream about moving to Alaska. And so after that point, it was like, opened my eyes to the realization that, oh, look, we can move to Alaska now because I don't have bleeds. I don't have to be close, tied to my hospital anymore. It was cool. I got to, quit telling stories to my kids about things that I've done in my life and be like, all right, look, let's go do this and experience that with them.
For Benjamin, Alaska became more than a move. It was a symbol of independence and rediscovery.
Who am I without the struggle? I'm a dad. I'm a coach for sports for my boys' sports team. I'm an outdoorsman.
But letting go of the struggle didn't erase the past. It actually meant facing what the past left behind.
I struggle with the survivor's guilt of being born in the 80s and going through that period of time and not being affected by um, all the problems that were going on, and watching my brothers be affected by it, and then all their complications, and some of them have died, and so it's just kind of crazy.
Even freedom can come with weight. The quiet question of how to rewrite your story when health gives you new opportunities, but memories still pull you back. Listeners, think about a time when the challenge you've known all your life disappears. What would you do with that freedom? In Alaska, Benjamin found balance, literally and figuratively.
Being in Alaska and being a part of nature, everything is a balance here in Alaska. Moving here, we've been here for 4 years now, and we've gotten rid of the noise. We don't watch sports anymore. We don't watch the news. We're not on all that stuff. We have a few apps that we use that get us the local stuff that's going on, and we can get the local information, but we don't listen to that noise anymore. And so I feel more connected with nature. We go outside and we hunt and we fish, and it is about being part of nature and using that. We fish and we hunt so that we don't have to go, so that we can supplement our food, and we're not buying so much food from the store anymore. We have friends and neighbors that have chickens and different other things that we can get, so that we're more more with nature, one with nature. And that was part of our thing of moving to Alaska, is we wanted to be, you know, I had this dream of homesteading, and homesteading is just using, um, balancing your life within nature and using nature to help, sustain life, and so. That was the whole process. So to have now a new medicine that's on board that works with that whole balancing thing, I feel like it's like the complete circle now, because it's now we're just worried about balancing our lives within nature, within medicine, within the whole thing.
When your story has always been about struggle, peace can feel unfamiliar. But maybe that's where real growth lies. Learning that strength doesn't disappear when the fight gets quieter. Benjamin's story reminds us that I'm fine doesn't mean the struggle is gone. It means we're learning who we are beyond it.
When there's no struggle, we get lost in nature.
Maybe that's where the answer lies. Not in being fine, but in finally being free. What does being free look like to you? Thank you, Ben, for your story, and thank you to Sanofi for supporting the I'm Fine segment. Consider your options and visit levelsmatter.com to learn more. Share this segment, subscribe to the BloodStream podcast, and hey, thanks for listening to I'm Fine. Thanks again, Hannah, and thank you, Ben, for joining today's program. Thanks as well to our presenting sponsor, Takeda, bleedingdisorders.com to learn more. And thanks as well to CSL Behring and Sanofi. We could not produce this show without your support, and for that we are extremely grateful. Okay, Bordeaux, next episode comes out on November 28th, just after Thanksgiving. What can listeners expect to hear?
I don't know. I feel like this is a little bit of a mic drop, but we're having a collab with the Blood Brother program.
We are. We are indeed.
That is the coolest thing I've heard in a while.
Yeah, we got like about 20 of us together for a nice couple hours where we talked about a few topics of interest based on some prior surveying, and people went deep. So if you are interested, if you've ever attended a Blood Brothers or Blood Sisters rap session or any kind of closed door, open, patient led conversation, let me tell you, this is an episode for you because people took the note and they shared openly. So if you're not already subscribed, be sure that you do subscribe to get that next episode delivered to you the moment it goes live. And with
I will
that,
say, a lot before you get into it, a lot of people aren't. It's not their space. I know there's a lot of caregivers in our community that's not necessarily a space that they would go to at HFA or another meeting. And this is a chance to kind of get, to be a fly on the wall a little bit about what those conversations are like in our Blood Brother community. So anyway, this is a really great, it's just a cool episode. So I'm looking forward to getting reactions from y'all.
and with that, listeners, that is all for this episode. Be sure to subscribe to the BloodStream podcast wherever you listen to have that next episode delivered to you the moment it goes live.
And y'all email us at mailbag@bloodstreammedia.com to inquire about casting for podcasts or maybe even our films. Also, you can email us to share your story or to suggest a topic that you would like to hear or a guest here on the BloodStream podcast. You can follow us on social media, me, Patrick, BloodStream Media, Believe Limited. Come find us on the internet.
Or at a patient event, just not.
Or in real life, but you could all on the internet too.
It's very good idea. I was going to say it's safe on the internet, but that's not true.
Yeah, it's not true. It's safe nowhere, but whatever.
I am your host, Patrick James Lynch.
And I am your other host, Amy Board.
And until next time, please take self-care of yourself. And bye, everybody.
Bye, y'all.